Hurricane Milton has finally exited the United States and the impacts have been felt, but the good news is that we are done in Florida for now when it comes to tropical systems, but there might be another tropical storm or hurricane that develops in the Caribbean Sea next week, which we'll be talking about today. In addition to that, we are going to be seeing a major weather pattern change across a large chunk of the United States, which is going to feature a big cold blast and maybe even the return of severe weather as we go later into this month. So let's begin with what's happening across the country right now, and you'll notice there is hardly any cloud cover across anywhere from the Great Plains all the way back through the East Coast, and mainly because Milton has finally moved away from the United States. This is post-tropical cyclone Milton. It became extra tropical after landfall in Florida. It was still producing significant damage, including the wind and as well as the storm surge and flooding rainfall, but it is finally out of here, and all that is left is really nice dry weather for much of Florida, which will be here probably for the next couple of days. Now, you may have heard, you may have also seen it, there were northern lights visible across nearly the entire United States last night. They were visible in Florida, Bermuda. This is actually a photo from Melissa on Facebook back over in North Texas. So again, the northern lights were visible last night. If you got to see them, it was a spectacular event, not nearly as intense as what we had it back in early May across much of the United States, but nonetheless, almost every state had visibility with either their camera or with the naked eye. Now, the weather pattern across the United States is about to change substantially, and the reason why is because the jet stream is actually going to be taking a big dip as we go into this upcoming week. So this is what the jet stream looks like right now. It's relatively zonal for most of the United States, a little bit more meridional. That's mainly because of that tropical system that's actually getting attached there to the jet stream, and that's essentially what's steering it out to sea, and that's why it's also extra tropical. This is what it looks like though as we go into Saturday into Sunday of this weekend. We are going to be seeing a large trough start to build back over in Canada, and the reason why this is important is because it's going to build a lot of cold air back up in Canada, and it's eventually going to just shatter into parts of the northern tier of the United States as we go into early next week. So as we eventually go into the early portion of next week, this big ball on the jet stream with the large trough is all going to start to drop into the Ohio Valley and Northeast, which is actually going to bring colder weather for almost the entire Great Plains and also back through anywhere east of that. So the East Coast, the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, the Northeast, and the Ohio Valley and Midwest are all going to take part in this colder air as we go into next week. And eventually, as we go later into next week, this trough eventually exits the country. So we are going to be dealing with probably 2, 3, maybe 4 days of colder than average weather for most of the East Coast. And then as we go into the later half of next week, a ridge is going to start to build again. But notice how the jet stream remains meridional, which means that there's a lot of curvature. That does mean that we should start to see a bit more of an active weather pattern as we go into the third and eventually fourth week of October here in the United States. Whether that is going to be some sort of severe weather event in the Great Plains or maybe even another tropical storm or hurricane, I do think we're going to stay active here as we go later into this month. So what does this all mean for the temperatures? Well, this is the temperature anomalies. It gives you an idea of above and below average temperatures in the United States. This is what it looks like through Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Again, notice this warm pocket of air mostly over the Great Plains. Once we go into early next week, though, that cold air mass is going to build really quickly, and it's going to plummet again into the Midwest and as well as back through the Ohio Valley by late Sunday night and Monday morning, and it's eventually going to go all the way down into the Southeast and as well as up and down the East Coast of the United States, and this is going to again sit there for several days. The Great Plains are going to be probably pretty hit or miss with this. It might just kind of edge that area, but other than that, we're not really going to be seeing this really impact the Great Plains heavily, but there will be a noticeable cool down, just not really as noticeable as the East Coast. Once we go later into the week, again, notice how that warm air mass builds right back in, and that basically means that we are going to be dealing with the repeat of what we've just seen for the last couple of weeks for much of the United States in terms of the heat. Now, this is what it looks like for temperatures over the next several days, and notice again the temperatures are going to drop, especially Monday morning in parts of the Midwest, with many areas seeing their first freeze of the season. But Tuesday, it's even going to be a little bit more noticeable. Areas like Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota all going to have the potential for freezing temperatures. That means that crops need to be protected, any sensitive vegetation. And as we go into Wednesday, notice how that cold air eventually goes into areas like the Northeast and as well as back over in the Mid-Atlantic. That is going to lead to even more areas below freezing as we even go into Wednesday. And high temperatures right now for Wednesday might not get out of the 40s in parts of the Northeast. So we are starting to see our first signs, I would say, of maybe at least fall, but eventually we can start to see something more like this as we go into the winter. And then eventually as we go later in this week by Friday, the temperatures will rebound across much of the United States. Now, Now, you might be wondering, are we going to see rain over the next 7 to 10 days? Well, we are in some areas, especially back over in the Ohio Valley and Northeast. As high pressure continues to dominate in the Southeast, we are eventually going to see showers and maybe even a few thunderstorms on Saturday into Sunday across the Ohio Valley as a trough begins to intensify. We even could see a few flurries, maybe a mix of rain and snow back over in areas like the upper Michigan Peninsula on Sunday, and the same thing could be said for the Northeast on Monday. But again, we're going to get plenty of rain back over in the Northeast and Ohio Valley as we go into the beginning of this upcoming week. Eventually, as we go into Wednesday and Thursday, high pressure builds across almost the entire Great Plains and the Southeast, which will keep things very dry. And then by next weekend would be the return of our next shot for showers and thunderstorms. And this might be, again, the return of severe weather. We haven't seen a whole lot of severe weather recently, aside from what Hurricane Milton brought in terms of tornadoes, but this might bring some severe weather back for the Great Plains, which we haven't seen in really, I feel like, about a month or two now. Now, the National Hurricane Center has just released their latest outlook. Milton is no longer on the map. We do have Tropical Storm Leslie, which is going off to the north. We have an area of development back over off the coast of Africa, not really expected to impact the United States right now. And then we also are watching an area back over here in the Caribbean Sea. It's not yet on the National Hurricane Center's forecasted map here, but I do think as we go later into next week, there could be some trouble brewing in the Caribbean Sea. And this is an area where Helene developed only a few weeks ago that went into Florida. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we could see a tropical storm or even another hurricane develop in the Caribbean Sea because of the Central American Gyre, which we're going to be talking about here over the next few minutes. Now let's jump into the GEFS ensemble members. What this shows you is a group of different ensemble members that are all showing basically the intensity and track of whatever could develop here in the Caribbean Sea as we go into next week. This is beginning with the weekend, so again, no development expected this weekend at all, so no reason to worry if you're anywhere near the Gulf Coast. One we have to watch for is when we go into the middle of next week. A lot of the ensemble members have a large spread, but at least have a low pressure center developing as we go into Wednesday of next week. Now, that is again about 7 days out from now. Things very easily could change, which is why we're not super confident that this is even going to happen. But with that said, the GFS model has been well ahead, I feel like, of a lot of models when it comes to predicting hurricanes this year. This is what it looks like by Thursday. Notice how a lot of these start to intensify with pressures around 993 millibars, which would be a tropical storm. This is where the concern grows. Some of them go into areas like Central America, anywhere near like the Yucatan Peninsula, but a few of these start to leak off and actually go into the Gulf of Mexico, which would not be a good thing. About 4 or 5 different of these ensemble members bring this into the Gulf of Mexico, and all of these at least at category 1 or 2 intensity as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. And then as we go into Sunday into Monday of the following week, so around October 20th, 21st, a lot of them split, but again, many of them bring into the Gulf of Mexico at least as some sort of hurricane. So we're gonna have to watch this very closely. I think we're gonna have a much more detailed breakdown on this in our next video, because this is definitely gonna be something to watch for if this trend does continue. Again, it is an early set trend. It is something that's been on the computer models for a few days now, but again, consistency does matter. It's been pretty consistent. I do think that this will definitely be a possibility. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you're not already for the latest details on this. Also, huge shout out to anybody that donated to the Y'all Squad through the Max Velocity campaign. We've raised over $35,000 for Hurricane Milton relief efforts. Thank you everybody that has donated. This is going to help a ton of people here across the state of Florida. There's been major impacts. I've witnessed it firsthand. If you go to my Twitter page at Max Velocity WX, we actually have photos of there being tornado damage back over near Fort Pierce, Florida. Storm Intermedia, me and Freddie actually went over there yesterday to survey some of that damage, and there was semis flipped over, cars flipped over. It was a disaster. A lot of this money will definitely help a lot of the people, though, that were impacted by this hurricane. If you want to donate, the link is also at the top of the description. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.